All right, man. Peace. So, brothers, first off, let me congratulate Mr. Errol Spence Jr. for an outstanding performance. He truly was stellar in the fight last night over Mikey Garcia. And let me also congratulate Mikey Garcia for showing that he can take a hell of a WA-ZA-ZA-ZA. Yo, that motherfucker got beat all around the ring. That man got beat all four corners of the ring. He got his ass whooped. I said, God damn. And Errol Spence showed some wrinkles that he's never shown me before. I've never seen that Errol Spence in the ring before. But I did know that Errol Spence was somewhere in there because, as I stated in one of my preview videos, Errol Spence was a bronze medalist in the 2012 Olympics. So whenever you're a medalist in the Olympics, what that means is that you understand how to outbox your opponent, because the amateur system is a point-based system. And there are not as many knockouts in the amateur boxing program as you'll see in the pros because there are bigger gloves, there's headgear, and there are less rounds. So in order for Errol Spence to be as successful in the amateur boxing circuit as he was, he has to have great craft. He had to have great craft back then, and he still has it now, and he put it on display last night. I didn't quite have it a shutout. I think I may have given Mikey Garcia round 2, but that was it. Maybe round 2. Other than that, it was 11 rounds to 1. To be quite honest with you, their fight reminded me a lot of Muhammad Ali's first fight against Floyd Patterson. It seemed to me at various points in the bout last night that Errol Spence could have tried to press the action even more to close the show, but he chose to step back. And the only question that I have about that was, did he choose to step back because he was still wary of Mikey Garcia's power and his counter-punching ability? Or did he step back because he wanted to make sure that the fight will go on as long as possible and he could punish his opponent as long as possible? A la Muhammad Ali against Floyd Patterson in their first fight. A la Muhammad Ali against Ernie Terrell. Because once again, there were various points in the fight where I'm accustomed to Errol Spence really trying to step it up like he did against Kell Brook, where he brought the hammer down on Kell Brook in round 10 of their fight. And that fight last night, he was backing away from Mikey a couple times. And I said to myself, maybe he's feeling Mikey's power because Mikey does have great power. And you could tell that Errol did respect Mikey's power and his counter-punching ability. And he did have some swelling around his eyes after the fight. Errol Spence did, I'm talking about. But there's no doubt in my mind that he was trying to make a point on Mikey Garcia. I believe that the Garcias got him very upset before the fight, with many of their innuendos about how they had the greater skill and the greater boxing IQ. None of that showed last night. There was not one aspect of the quote-unquote sweet science that Mikey Garcia showed that he was better than Errol Spence at. Not footwork, not head movement, not defense, not jab, not counter-punching, nothing. Ring generalship. There was not one aspect of boxing that Mikey Garcia showed that he was better than Errol Spence at, other than maybe just taking a good old-fashioned ass whooping. Because that's what he took. And the question right now is, where does Mikey Garcia go from here? Because even in the boxing circles, amongst the cognoscenti or the boxing scribes, they're starting to postulate over how much stock Mikey Garcia lost last night. And when I say stock, I'm talking about his value as a fighter. Because when you take an ass whooping like that, I guarantee you, Mikey will be pissing blood for the next week or so after that ass whooping that he took. He took some flush body shots, and once again, I have to give him a lot of credit. Because some of the body shots that he took last night, I've seen other fighters totally collapse, fold in on themselves when Errol hit them like that to the body. So I give Mikey a lot of credit for the ass whooping that he took. Very strong fighter, very mentally strong fighter Mikey Garcia is. But still, if it wasn't a shutout, it was 11 to 1. So what Errol showed the boxing world last night, mainly Keith Thurman and Terrence Crawford, is that if you think that you're going to come into the ring with me and outsmart me and outcraft me, you better think again. I promise you that Bud Crawford watched that fight last night and said, oh, okay, this dude has a little bit more than I thought he had. And Keith Thurman, Keith was running from his ass anyway. Keith was running when he thought Errol was just a brawler. But like I've stated already, Keith Thurman came up in that same time period in the amateur program as Errol Spence. So he knows all about Errol Spence. That's why I stated in previous videos pertaining to this topic that when Floyd Mayweather told Keith Thurman, "You can get a fight with me if you beat Errol Spence." If you're Keith Thurman and you're as hungry and as thirsty to be the #1 fighter in the world as he claimed, that's supposed to be no problem, because Floyd Mayweather is the money man. So if all you have to do is beat a prospect to get to Floyd Mayweather, why wouldn't you do it unless you already know how good that boy is? Keith Thurman been known how good Errol Spence was. Before we even heard of Errol Spence, Keith Thurman knew about Errol Spence. And Floyd Mayweather, he came to know Errol Spence in the build-up or in the sparring matches during the build-up to Floyd's fight against Robert Guerrero. That's where the stories about Floyd Mayweather and Errol Spence having these sparring wars first started to emanate from the fight camp after Floyd got out of prison and he was preparing for his match against Robert Guerrero. Point being is this: Keith Thurman has always known what Errol Spence was, and he's going to be forced to face him. But to be honest, Keith might luck out for now, because it appears as if Errol has his sights on other fighters. He's calling out Manny Pacquiao. He's completely disrespecting Shawn Porter. So who knows? Maybe Errol has moved on. Maybe he's over Keith Thurman. And at the end of the day, I think that Keith Thurman, some of his stock has dropped. He has not been active the last 2 years. In his last performance, he was badly hurt in a couple of the rounds, almost got stopped. I think that if he were a lesser fighter, the ref may have thought about stopping the fight. If he were not Keith Thurman and a fighter who has a championship pedigree, the ref may have stopped the fight. So right now, Keith still has to build up his name a bit more. So it may be to his advantage that Errol Spence is trying to figure out who he wants to fight next, either Manny Pacquiao or Shawn Porter. I do believe this. I think that if Errol Spence ends up fighting Shawn Porter next, it's going to put Keith in the position where he has to fight Pacquiao. And I'm not quite sure if that Pacquiao fight is going to be as easy for Keith as he thinks it's going to be. Even in Manny's losses, he normally puts forth a stellar effort, if not a stellar performance. Even in his losses, he's always going to fight hard. There are going to be points in the fight when Keith Thurman is fighting Manny Pacquiao where Pacquiao's punches are going to be coming from weird angles, great speed, and very good power. And Keith is going to have to be able to adjust. He's shown in the past that he has a very high boxing IQ, but I'm not quite sure if he's the same fighter that he was before the layoff. But we'll find out. Just getting back to Errol Spence, what's next for him? Pretty much the sky's the limit. Manny Pacquiao was at his fight last night, came into the ring. As I've already stated, Errol Spence very respectfully called him out. I think that Errol Spence understands the significance of being able to defeat Manny Pacquiao should they match up. Especially if Errol were to get the knockout. Manny Pacquiao's not been knocked out since Juan Manuel Marquez sparked his ass. I mean, that was one of the most vicious knockouts I've ever seen. I honestly thought the man was dead. When Juan Manuel Marquez knocked out Manny Pacquiao, I thought Manny was dead. I remember looking at my screen saying, yo, he killed this motherfucker. This dude is not going to get up. The way he fell down like lightning struck his ass, man. So if Errol Spence if he can KO Manny Pacquiao in a spectacular fashion like how Juan Manuel Marquez did, all of a sudden his purses will jump from however much he made in this fight. Supposedly, I think he made somewhere around $8 million. Now his purses jump into the $20 million range if he's able to knock out Manny Pacquiao. Because I'm sure that's around what Manny Pacquiao is making under Al Heyman. So that's a fight that Errol has to make happen, and he has to be spectacular in that fight. If he fights Shawn Porter, that's going to be a great match, but Shawn's going to get badly hurt. After what I saw Ugas do to Shawn Porter, number one, I think that Shawn is on the other side of it. I think that he had the best performance of his career, probably against Danny Garcia. But he also took a lot of damage in that fight. And I'm not quite sure if he came back quite the same. And then you have a fighter like an Ugas, who's big, hits very hard, and of course was very well schooled in the Cuban boxing program. And he hurt Shawn Porter. As I've stated in many of the boxing analyst roles that I've seen Shawn Porter in since that fight, you can tell that he still is very foggy-headed. He's still dealing with some concussion syndrome. I can see that when I see him speak. He consistently forgets certain points that he's trying to make. He starts searching for words. That's never been a problem for him before. I've seen him on television before. So he needs to consider taking some time off. If I were in his advisor group, I would tell him to take some time off. Maybe link up with Tim Bradley and speak to him about the therapist that Tim Bradley went to after the Provodnikov fight, where Tim Bradley basically went on a kamikaze mission to try to prove to people that he was a great fighter after he got depressed when he got that gift decision against Pacquiao. But just getting back to the fight, once again, the sky's the limit for Errol Spence. I think that he'll probably fight 3 or 4 more fights at 147, move up to 154, give his buddy Jermell Charlo time to move up to 160, because it's very obvious that Jermell Charlo is scared to death of Errol Spence. The way he kisses his ass, it's very clear that he's scared to death of him. He's been in the ring with him and knows what he can do and knows how hard he punches. And I don't think that Jermell Charlo would ever want to fight Errol Spence. I think that that's pretty clear. So I think that Errol's going to fight 3, maybe 4 more fights at welterweight, move up to 154, get a belt there. And hopefully in the next 3 or 4 years, if the society lasts that long, we'll get to see an Errol Spence versus Canelo Alvarez super fight. That would be one for the ages. But I think that fight is probably 3 or 4 years away. We'll see. What's next for Mikey Garcia? Well, we can start with a series of CAT scans, MRIs, to make sure nothing is broken, fractured, or there's not been an excessive amount of brain trauma. That's the first thing he needs. Next, he should take about a year off, try to get back down to 135 and defend his title. That's what he's going to have to do. Because at 147, the fighters are just too big and too skilled as well for him to win right now. I do believe that he wants to win at 147 before he retires, but he's going to have to wait until there's a dearth of talent in the welterweight division. Right now, the welterweight division is too talented for him to beat anybody there. He's not going to beat Sean Porter. We already just saw what happened with him and Errol Spence. I don't think he beats Keith Thurman. I'm not quite sure if he beats Pacquiao. The Pacquiao one might be close. Mikey might be able to hang with Pacquiao, if for no other reason, the power that he has and the craft that he has as well. He might bring a Juan Manuel Marquez type of vibe to a Manny Pacquiao fight, but I just don't think that that fight is going to get made right now. I believe that Manny Pacquiao came to witness the Errol Spence versus Mikey Garcia fight, hoping that Mikey would win so that he could challenge Mikey. I don't think that Manny Pacquiao wants the Errol Spence fight. I don't think anybody wants the Errol Spence fight. I mean, what really do you have to gain by fighting Errol Spence if you don't have to? The dude is almost 5'10". He punches like a light heavyweight. He has great craft. And now he's showing wrinkles that he's never shown before. He showed great head movement and foot movement last night, things that he very rarely has shown. So it's very clear that Errol Spence's next fight will be against the fighter who's the most embarrassed by Errol Spence. If I had to bet, Errol Spence will be fighting Sean Porter next and not Manny Pacquiao. I think that Manny Pacquiao will probably try to fight Keith Thurman next, especially coming off of Keith Thurman's last victory, where he had some moments where, as I stated, it was very clear that he almost got knocked out. So if I were to bet, the next 2 big PBC events are going to be Errol Spence against Sean Porter and Keith Thurman against Manny Pacquiao. And of course, everybody wants Pacquiao because with Pacquiao, you're guaranteed to be on pay-per-view. That's why Errol Spence is calling out Manny Pacquiao. Errol Spence knows if he fights Sean Porter, it's probably going to be on regular Showtime or on Fox. And just getting back to Mikey Garcia for a moment. Mikey Garcia's corner should be embarrassed. They should have stopped that fight after the 9th or 10th round. But I think they just wanted to go the distance so that Mikey Garcia could say, I lasted 12 rounds with Errol Spence. But was it worth it? That's the question. You lost damn near every round. So going into the 11th, 12th round, you're down 10 rounds already, and the 12th round, you caught a hellified ass whooping. Like, I mean, all that tough guy shit looks cool for TV, but when you're going back to the shower after the fight and you're shaking uncontrollably like Rocky was at the start of Rocky 5, and you have 3 kids and a wife, was it really worth it to take that punishment in the 11th and 12th rounds? I don't think it was. So we'll see. I predict that Mikey will take anywhere from 8 months to a year off. come back and try to defend his lightweight title, assuming that he has not been stripped of it. But once again, his corner should have stopped the fight. And let me also say this. I told you, brothers, that Errol Spence felt some type of way about Ray Leonard and Mike Tyson saying what they said in regards to him, or the comparison between Errol Spence and Mikey Garcia. I told you, brothers, that Errol Spence was not just going to let that fly. He was very shrewd and prudent prior to the fight in the press conference when he tried to act as if it was not bothering him. But clearly it was. And I think that he's starting to realize many of the things that Floyd Mayweather has stated about many of the former all-time greats. That being that they are quote-unquote closet haters. Floyd Mayweather always has this so-called penchant or this reputation for being a quote-unquote hater. But 99 times out of 100, when Mayweather does not say something complimentary about a fighter, he will substantiate it. He'll say, here's why I believe that this fighter lost. Like he did with Deontay Wilder. He stated that Deontay Wilder was not boxing. All he was trying to do was throw power shots. When he spoke about his own fighter, Badou Jack, he was saying that Marcus Brown was outboxing him. When you see many of these other quote-unquote old-time fighters, who so many of the pro blackity black wokety woke boxing fans on the internet love to venerate and lionize, they do the same things that many of the pro blackity blacks accuse Floyd Mayweather of doing, that in my view, for the most part, he does not do. That being trying to nitpick and overly scrutinize certain fighters for whatever reason. Now we know that Sugar Ray Leonard, he lost to a lightweight in Roberto Duran. So maybe he saw a similar matchup between Mikey Garcia and Errol Spence as was heading into his first match against Roberto Duran. And he thought that Errol Spence was not going to have the boxing IQ to be able to overcome what Mikey Garcia was going to bring to the table. Well, unlike Sugar Ray Leonard, Errol Spence did not allow his emotions to control how he fought in his fight against Mikey Garcia, which would have been the only chance that Mikey Garcia would have had, is if Errol Spence fought emotionally like Ray Leonard did against Roberto Duran. That was an event that really set Sugar Ray Leonard's career back, and it elevated Roberto Duran to being considered at the time arguably the greatest fighter of all time. This was a fighter in Roberto Duran who I believe at that time, after he defeated Ray Leonard, was something like 72-1 or 77-1. Some insane record he had. He'd reigned at lightweight for many years. He only lost one fight at lightweight. Then he moved up, and he was able to defeat a series of welterweight challengers and champions, and then he faced off against Ray Leonard and totally outboxed him over the course of that fight. He was better in just about every aspect, Roberto Duran was. Number one, in his tactics. There was no way that Ray Leonard was supposed to fight the fight that he fought in that first fight. And just getting back to the point, I think that he was thinking of that when he picked Mikey Garcia over Errol Spence. And sometimes a lot of these people, they outthink themselves. They try to be smarter than they really are. They want to be the guy who says it ahead of time that the underdog is going to win, even when the underdog really has no chance. I never thought that Mikey Garcia had a chance. The only thing that surprised me was that he was able to last for 12 rounds. So I give him a lot of credit for that. So peace.